Okay. Thank you, Amilcar, very much. And also my thanks to the library. The couple of events that we've done here have been really great. And the people that I've been working with are also terrific. So thank you very much. I think about books a lot. And I do make books. And I actually also make content that goes in the books. Artists that make artist books, and if you haven't seen the show yet, you all should. Those artists make the book, make the objects, and also the content. So hence the title of the exhibition, the book as subject and object. I am going to present to you two bodies of work. And kind of briefly, I do a lot of work, and each book represents a larger body of work. And what I'm showing you is a small sampling from each book. And I'll talk about them. I'll talk a little bit more generally. And then I'd be very interested to have a conversation with you and hear any of your thoughts. And not only about my work, but maybe about the book as an object, and I know there's a lot of librarians here. The fate of reading, and anything else you want to talk about. So, I'm going to read a quote to you from Christopher Morley, who was living in the first part of the 20th century, and I'll just read it. Ink is handicapped in a way because you can blow a man up with gunpowder in half a second, while it may take 20 years to blow him up with a book. But the gunpowder destroys itself along with its victim, while a book can keep on exploding for centuries. So I just thought that was still pertinent to our discussion. I'm going to read a little bit and then talk specifically about this piece. Language has seeped into my work, insinuated itself over the course of 20 years in various bodies of work. The intersection of text and image, and especially the evolution of the image as an analogy or shadow of the text, has been a unifying notion in both the books and related works, some of which I'm going to show you here. In the earlier phase, I was interested in identity, memory, and family history, which primarily took the form of artist books. In these, the notion of voice was addressed through the use of found texts, letters, and these were combined with my own writing. I was obsessed with this family history because at the time I wasn't interested in continuing it. With the birth of my child, my perspective shifted, and so did the source of the voice. My response to the political is the personal, and I have used my artist books as the vehicle to articulate my family history. In my attempt to understand and come to terms with the past, I examine a very specific story, and in so doing, I look at a very small part of an enormous history. The process of making the books reveals to me often what I am trying to see, hear, and understand, and I know that's the experience with many people who make art, probably most artists, is that you don't know really what you're doing, or you don't know what you're going to see till you make it, and then you see it. So the work reflects back to you. I hope that the books, which convey a very particular experience, and my experience in making them, will act as a mirror and a way to open a dialogue with the viewer. So simultaneously, the work then becomes, it's a mirror to you, and then sort of you flip it, and it's the mirror to the viewer. So this has, I'm sorry, I use found text as well as my own writing. A particular book focuses all the work in the studio until its completion. And I'm very interested in pushing the definition of a book, in exploring scale, and the issues of considering the book as a container and an object. So some of my books, and the one that's in the gallery, and then I have another example here, I challenge, what we would say, how big that container is, or what a book contains, and the book becomes an installation object. So that's something that has interested me very much in the work. So what we see here is actually in the collection of the Houghton Library, And I, as I said, I was kind of obsessed with this family story and the family history. And in the family, on my mother's side, there was a story that was repeated again and again. And I bet a lot of you have a story. There's like a central, you know, kind of sort of the myth or the mythology of your family. And there's variations of it. And no, this happened, no, that happened, and so on. So I wrote a poem imagining the arc of, you know, part of the story. And so this is a one-of-a-kind book that the spread is about like that. And the text is written by me. The images are on handmade paper. And at the time, I was like making everything that I was, you know, all the surfaces. So I made the paper, I made the ink, and so on. And the text is actually like vinyl lettering that you apply with heat, and so I like that kind of the contrast of the form. So if you see the book, the text is actually shiny and the image is kind of muted. Anyway, so this is a spread of this book, which is I think about 30 pages, with this kind of very formal text on one side, image on the other. I think this is the last line. We are crossroads, the wanderers, the heart possible. So you can see that I work abstractly, and although I'm driven by narrative, but the end result is a kind of abstraction. So that, but in the abstraction, there is a correspondence to what the text is about. So just a little bit of background of what the story is. So on my maternal side is of Sephardic extraction, dating back to the 14th century in Italy. And as I began researching this history, so after I kind of made up this, you know, story, this poem, I started really being interested in finding kind of the underpinning. And I was telling some folks in the talk I did yesterday that I'm kind of a wannabe academic, but I'm not an academic, and I'm not a scholar, but I'm an artist. But I'm very interested in research and, you know, kind of understanding what I'm doing, at least partly what I'm doing. Again, although it was based in fact, the book was poetic in every sense. So following this, I did a lot of research. I interviewed people. I went on several trips to Italy, you know, that kind of thing. And it resulted in several very monumental books. And this one here is actually a book, as you can see, as a hanging installations that hangs 14 feet by 7 feet, and then actually folds up into a box about like this. But it becomes something else. So it's a book, and it has all the qualities of a book. There is a sequence. There is a narrative. It actually is kind of an intimate object, but it also does something else. It becomes this. So this is based on a matrix of a family tree. Someone actually was doing some research, and there was a handwritten genealogical tree that I just loved the shape of it. I was like, oh, this is so interesting, just what it looked like. And that started this piece. So, you know, I took these trips to Italy. I went to the cemetery. I visited relatives I didn't know. And I was, you know, kind of accumulating information for this work. And I was also just always interested in the stories and how people varied the stories. And I feel like in this work that I'm participating in the telling and the retelling. And I don't know about any of you, but it seems that in many families there's kind of an appointed or a self-appointed person who's interested in this stuff, and you know, people write about it, or they make art about it, or they're you know, they're the person who is writing that genealogical tree and getting in touch. So. So my experience at the time, anyway, was that I was that self-appointed person. And at the time, this is all just kind of storytelling within the story. But at the time, my grandmother was alive, who was an incredibly interesting person with her own amazing story. And she lived to be 106, and with her memory perfectly intact. Anyway, she, of course, loved that I was taking this on as a project. And so many of the, why I'm telling you this is many of the stories and the, that under narrative comes from her. It was sort of through her eyes, in a way. So it's really interesting when you're dealing with issues of memory that it's kind of like, how you look at a picture of yourself when you were a little kid. So you may not even remember it, but you think you remember it because you can see the image of yourself as the 6-year-old at the birthday party. So in a way, these were these were totally not my memories. They were someone else's memories, but I was absorbing them. And it was a really interesting sort of dynamic between myself and the grandmother. So anyway, I think I'm going to show you a couple of details. So this is just to give you a better look of what the piece is, and I'll explain it in a minute. So this is looking up at the top, and there's these little folios that have tree-like images. So there's like there's a vertical context and a horizontal context of text as well as imagery. So this piece is produced by layering imagery so that things are revealed and concealed at the same time. So in my work, I'm interested in kind of the analogy of how this issue of memory, and I try to embed it in the work by layering and then obfuscating and then revealing. Just the process itself echoes these ideas. So this piece is 95 pages, each measuring 9 by 11. And again, in this one, I made the paper. I'm going to show you another detail. I made the paper, and I made the ink, and so on and so forth. These are all inextricably bound by knots that act as hinges in each of the 5 vertical chapters. The small folios that I showed you are at the top. There's 15 of those. And they reiterate the tree-like forms of the larger pages. So I'll just go back a minute. So if you see the pages that are sort of darker, those are all very dense imagery. And if they were to be put together, like sort of a column, it would make an image of a tree. So I kind of took that idea of family tree and real trees, or my version of trees. And because of what this is about was to really come to terms with this great-grandmother, the mother of my grandmother, who was killed at Auschwitz. That's really what the story is about. And I, take a sort of a very long, inadvertent route to get to this idea. The idea of displacement and diaspora is expressed in the piece, because if you were to cut any one of those little hinges, it wouldn't be a whole. So I do that a lot in my work, where all the materials express what I'm interested in. Maybe an analogy of that would be a good cover of a book. You sort of get something about the book from the visual, from that first look. So that's Trace. And the other thing about that is, so I've made something that I want you to understand and I want you to read. And each one of these pages has text in it, and it's actually a sort of a line of text from writing by me, but taken out of context. So that too is dispersed. The text is dispersed and not coherent in a certain way. Where was I going with that? No, that's it, I think. Okay. So the next 4 slides is the piece Voices, which is the piece in the gallery, and this is what it looks like when it's rolled up. So again, a piece that is enormous in scale, I'd say oversized, a although you've probably seen the Japanese scrolls in the MFA and other collections, which are also very, very large and are meant to be, you are meant to, their narrative moving from left to right. So this is the piece that's currently in the show. So it was interesting. At this time, like, all of a sudden, the people in my family were, like, sending me stuff because I knew I was so interested in this. And what happened was this, there was a packet of letters that were found that were written by this maternal great-grandmother from an internment camp in 1944 in Italy. And somebody found them. They had been completely forgotten about, basically abandoned in somebody's house, and somebody found them, and that person sent me translation of the letters. So I felt like I had her voice. It was really like an amazing, just that. Thought you'd be interested in these letters, and the last letter was written like a couple weeks before she was killed. So this, because I'm always so interested in voice, and not only sound, but you know, the internal voice of someone. And anyway, there I had her voice. So I didn't know what to do with him at first, and I just kind of sat with him while I was, you know, doing research and doing other projects. So, and I did many things with the letters. I sort of wrote to them. I created a piece out of the letters. I did a really interesting sculptural project where I built a room that was made of the text, and I had a sound piece. And anyway, it kept sort of presenting interesting ideas. And as I told you, I was obsessed with it, so I had to, you know, I had to finish it. So in this piece, I am working strictly with the text of the letters themselves, and again, sort of extracting words that are dispersed and floating through the passages of images. They interact visually with each other, which in turn are a response to the words. In another related book, Voce, which I don't have pictures of, which is a small edition of 10, her text is a counterpoint to my text. So I wrote different writing to the letters. So, and I was thinking like my voice, her voice, you know, kind of corresponding, conversing with each other in sort of some kind of imaginary way. So it's a group of 11 poems, and my, you know, wish at the time, and maybe even a motivating factor, was that somehow my work would save her, and more modestly that I could bury her properly. So in this sort of the story that kept repeating itself, I think there's was a lot of guilt for the people that were not killed, and you know, that happened typically, that the people who survive, you know, they suffer also because they were not affected in the ways that other people were. So I guess I sort of took that on in the work, and since I don't write books and I don't, you know, I'm not a journalist, I do this. So I will show you some passages. So if those of you who have seen the show, you know that this goes on for a long time. So what we're looking at is about 6 feet. And it's, those shapes are actually little seed pods that I had in my studio, and kind of, you know, collect things. And I thought of those seed pods as a symbol of generation and regeneration. And, you know, so I was part of the regeneration from Gemma, from my great-grandmother. So the text, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's in Italian, and there's just kind of extracted from the letters. And she was always writing. She wrote to, they were addressed to a Catholic neighbor, and I think the neighbor actually did get the letters, and then she gathered them, and then she gave them, and then they were stuck in that drawer for 40 years. So anyway, the letters did get out, but she kept asking, could you send sugar? Could you get a typewriter? Could you call the lawyer? You know, that kind of litany of requests that were not answered. So I have a couple. Oh, and it's attached to a cylinder of salt. I don't know if you noticed that, but the ends of the scroll are a cylinder of salt, which of course salt is there's lots and lots of meaning and meaning of salt or symbolism of salt, and it just seemed like a good thing to attach this to. Salt of the earth and so on, salt of tears. So as it progresses, as it sequences in a way, it goes from this very bright white layered and ends with this dark kind of color, and those shapes then kind of float on top and become kind of ghost-like imagery, and well, I kind of think of a scroll as endless. So it's I mean it's kind of a narrative, but it doesn't really begin or end, and it just kind of repeats. I think that's the last. Oh no, there. I guess it ends there. And I also, again, kind of thinking of the material or the imagery echoing the idea is there's this kind of web or threading of these kind of cacophony of that linear element, and I sort of think of those as the threads on the other piece that a family is woven together, and any part of it could disperse or break, but it's still it's tied together. So, and these are things when I'm making art or when I'm doing this, I don't think all these things out. I don't like lecture to myself like these things, but this is kind of what shows up. This is what I end up thinking, or maybe what I end up seeing after I've made it, that kind of where the piece becomes a mirror. And this is not a book, but I just wanted to show you a piece that is a related work. So as I said, each body of work has, or each book has a body of work. So this is a really, really large drawing, essentially. So it's about 7 by 8 feet. And it's made in the same way. And there's lots of, again, kind of hidden imagery and photographs or photo images that are embedded in the piece. So the piece has its own kind of history or a kind of secret inside. And this is called listening. So again, thinking about sound and voice. I worked, this body of work went on for about 6-7 years, and I kind of exhausted myself in it. It was more or less done. And as I started to say earlier, I didn't really think I was going to continue this family line, but I did because I had a baby, and that just kind of shifted everything because that's what it does. And as an artist, that shift was expressed in my work. And I'd say there was about 2 years gap between what I'm showing you and then, or what I first showed you in this, because I sort of just made horrible work because it was just so much transition, and I was, thinking about things in a much sort of less intellectual way, or different kind of research. So anyway, this became a new narrative that was very particular and singular, following the birth of my son, and he became the conduit and the new means of exploring the idea of family, as well as my persistent interest in voice. And my observations of his language development overlap with my continued interest in trying to express voice visually, which is, like impossible. His efforts from his early utterances to later conversations led the way into something I could not have anticipated, kind of like the other work. You don't know where it's going to take you. So this book, which is titled Best, I was actually unable to unite text and image the way I had been doing. So I actually created a little book, which you see on the left, and I continued to experiment with presentation and therefore the form of the book itself. So this is the book where the pages of image are on the right, and they're actually on hinges, and you can pull them off and kind of play with the sequence in that way. So I was, I'm always kind of trying to push, like, well, what about this object? How can I make the object function in a different way? So that's a detail of the little book that was on the right. So when at the time I was sewing, like everything got sewn. I thought, like, everything, I was just sewing everything. So I sewed these little sort of drawings, and I was literally at the, with sort of my project with my son was from the time the sounds, you know, the first utterances, had a log of those things. If I was a linguist like Professor Randall, I would be, you know, writing books about it, or Steven Pinker, but I'm not. So, so I was just literally like trying to document them. And in the earlier versions, I was writing those words and sounds in these books and in the work, and eventually those went away, and it's just shapes. So. So the next several slides are, again, details of much longer books. So these are now much smaller in scale, but you know what I'm showing you is a spread, and there's, you know, a lot more of each one. So showing books it's always a challenge, either in exhibition or on a screen. So anyway, to give you just a taste, so these are again kind of mixed media, and I'm thinking of the pages or the spreads as kind of sites of sound, so that there would be utterances or sounds coming out of them. And this phenomenon and persistence of language itself can be seen as an accumulation, which was also the way my work evolved. The building up of layers produces a kind of internal grammar or reading, as well as an external statement. So you see something, but there's also things that you don't see, that kind of revealing and not revealing at the same time. This piece is actually a very small book called Access. And again, I was doing a lot of sewing as mark making, or sometimes I would do the writing with sewing. Sometimes I would do the writing with sewing and then unravel the thread, kind of, and that itself would be an image, you know, just the pricks. And that's another detail from a book called, this is also from Access. And it's interesting, I was also telling the folks yesterday in my talk where if you're a woman artist and you do work about children, that's not so great. You know, I mean, you are not well accepted in the kind of, you know, in the art world. But I was damned if I wasn't going to do something, you know, to do work about that was really, really interesting to me. So anyway, my way of dealing with that was that I reduced my color completely. I was only working in like black and white. So that was sort of my way of, you know, not being accused of, I didn't want to be accused of like, you know, anything sentimental or, you know, Mary Cassatt. This was like real art, really interesting. It was about language. Anyway, so these, let's see, we'll go to the last couple images. So this is from a book called Heart Ladder. Yeah, I was also, you know, again, interested in this sort of, not only the text or the words as an analog, but sort of very interested in the text as image, you know. I think these works record, hopefully in some way, what all parents do as they are able to with children, which is to listen, to repeat, and notice the sounds that will become words, then short phrases and sentences and thoughts, and finally entering dialogue and conversation. In the books, I'm also using kind of images from childhood, toys and animals, letter forms, pieces of hair sometimes, and sometimes just images, but not just the images, but the things themselves are combined with evidence of this earliest discovery of language. And these shapes and resulting compositions and formats became another version of language, in a way my own signage, and my own way of finding voice. And I feel like I'm always learning or inventing a new set of vocabularies, and always starting from the beginning, whether a new project or in the same one that I've been working on for a long period of time. And I begin not knowing what I'm going to say. I feel like I have no words. And eventually, through what seems like endless labor, and I do kind of think of my work as labor, I the process of making them is really important, and they take a really long time. Um, I feel like I'm able to speak. I make a commitment to the work until I become sort of intelligible and completing the journey from sounds to complicated thoughts. So that kind of, watching him acquire language, really felt like I think it's why I found it so just amazing and riveting, was that it just felt so analogous to the art making process. And so for each book or body of work, I go through this again. And I think that's it for the visuals. But so what's happened since then is I've been making paintings and sculpture, and it kind of looks different, but I have the same kind of concerns. And where the shapes, it's no longer about acquiring language. It's about, again, that kind of relationship to mark making, I guess, in the end, and language, and kind of a personal language. What I find compelling about books right now, since I'm not making them, is curating exhibitions and putting people together who, this is a very particular one way of doing things with a particular interest, and there are so many different ways, infinite ways that people use the book as a means of expression, and for me that is really compelling, and as expressed in the exhibition that's upstairs, putting people together who are often thinking about similar things, but in different ways. So I think that's it. So I know I'm standing up here and you're sitting there, but I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or questions or your own ideas or anything. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk, excuse me, a little bit about the form of the book. Is it something that you made a creative decision that you wanted to make books, or is that what you started doing and you realized that they were books, or did someone else?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I've been making art for a long time, and I had been writing for quite a while, very privately, kind of, and I went back to graduate school in my late 30s, and I took a book class. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I just thought it'd be interesting, and it completely changed my life, basically. Where I was like, aha, I can put these two things together. I mean, that's kind of simplifying it, but it became the book itself. I think one of the main things about the book form, and I find many people who make books, and I teach books, so my students, it is a way, because the book is an intimate object, it's a close relationship of the reader or the viewer to the object. There's something about that intimacy that allows for, I don't think I wouldn't maybe even be tackling the subjects that I did if I was just making sculpture or painting, So, and it's interesting, even though now I'm not making books, I'm not making books, but all my thinking is the same, and I guess I'm trying to get those objects to speak in a way that I want the books to. But let me think about other people that make, well, another example, Peter Madden, who's in the show, he collects stuff. He never says he's an artist, he just says I collect things. He feels like he's an archivist, actually. And he never buys art materials, so if you see, he makes stuff out of paper bags or found pieces of wood or whatever. So it's like he's collecting those things, and the form that is right for him are books. So it's kind of a roundabout way to, but there's something compelling about the book, I'd say. The book as an object rather than, I don't know, a canvas on the wall.
Do you have a definition that you use for what a book is?
A book is, or an artist book, or just a book? Okay, so let's see. The book is a container of ideas. That's an A. Do you have one? No. What would you say if someone asked you that question?
That's what I've been thinking about.
That it.
You don't open a painting.
Right. That's, yeah, actually, and my whole thing, I probably said that a bunch of times, like revealing and, concealing. So the book opens and it reveals itself. So I guess I'm interested in all those kind of metaphors of the book. It reveals itself. It's a container. There's something revered about it. These one-of-a-kind books are kind of erratic. Books that were produced in, let's say, the 13th century in France by those monks, those were definitely, or there was only one of them. Not many people could read them. They were made out of gold and lapis lazuli. They were really erratic. And they were about God usually, or the Bible stories and whatnot. So, and I think we kind of carry that with us, perhaps. Right, I made a small edition, right.
So would you talk a little bit about deciding to make editions of books? Because in my notion of a book, there's usually not just one. There are multiple.
Right, right. So, again, a long time ago, there was only one of them. you know,
Books actually copied.
right. But, yeah, okay, but there weren't a lot of them. They weren't right. So, exactly, that is correct. So, but since my works, well, this is just me, because some people who make artist books, like Laura Davidson in the show, she makes small editions, or there are actually places that devote themselves to books or specialized kind of books where you as a maker can have an edition of 100, say, a limited edition, right? So I had been making, and I mostly make, one-of-a-kind books that become something else. They become like sculpture. So they kind of straddle, I guess, what a book is and what a sculpture is, or something. They're because of their objectness. And I was actually thinking, well, wouldn't it be a good idea to have more than one? And so I did make a small edition, but I made a small edition as if it's a variable edition. So this is just my own sort of predilection. So I made an edition, and they sort of resemble each other, and they all have the same writing, but they kind of vary. So that's not exactly an answer to your question. Yeah. So they become, okay, so then if it's only one, it's sort of erratic, I guess I'll use that word. It becomes like there's only one of them. It's like that special, or specialized in a certain way.
One of the things that I'm that I'm struggling with is when people write books, I think they're doing it because they have something to say or think they have something to say, and they want others to read it.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you want us to look at your books? Can they be read, and should we read them? And are you really trying to tell a story to everyone?
I guess the access is limited, right? So,
I'm really interested in the story about your
right. But see, I guess because I'm not I'm also interested in that story, and we could have this conversation about it, or I could do it orally. I could tell you the story, right? But in my work, and this is maybe just a result of like my personality or something, which is that I don't want to tell it to you directly. I want to tell it to you obliquely.
And I could see that just in the way you approached it. It was 15 minutes. You kept talking about this story. And
Right. I mean,
minutes, we got a little clue about what
right, right.
it's very different.
Right, because otherwise I would write a, but see, I don't think I'm a writer really. I'm an artist. If I was a writer, that's what I was saying before, I would write this story. And actually there's, someone in my family did write a story about that family. And there's, like any family, there's all these kind of interwoven and overlapping stories, and it goes this way and this way. But you see, I'm almost like I'm more interested in that shape of like, oh, it goes this way and this way. That's how I would respond to that. It would be like, oh, that shape is so interesting. So, yeah. But I guess the answer is that it's kind of a specialized audience because, yeah, because it is, right. Yeah, and then even in, like, some of these books are in collections, and then it's really, then you have to go to the, you have to go look at it and, you know, make an appointment and things like that. So.
Deborah, I was struck when you were talking about making the book about your child and how you wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, so you made some choices based on that. And I was wondering, as you were going through the process, and then also afterward, if you thought more about those choices, and if you were to do something at some point, some piece of art that's also about your child, would you make different choices or would you make similar choices?
I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever do work about him again, actually. It feels like it's, I mean, that's the thing when you make art, it's like you, or books like this, is you, it takes you. So I'm like in this place where I'm using a lot of color. And actually, historically, I often, as a, almost as a, kind of to get in my own way, if I'm like really, if like, oh, I just really love all these colors, I'll say, I'll kind of give myself an assignment to just use black and see what happens with that. So, but, I mean, I was being a little flip about it, but, you know, it's a little bit true of, you know, if I'm, as a woman artist, if I were a male artist and I was doing work about my child's language, it would be, well, first of all, it would look different, but, you know, sort of the response might be different. And I think that's true. So, and I also love working in black and white. I love seeing how much information I can get out of a really limited means. So what happened was I started adding red a little bit, and then that kind of brought me to working in color again. So, but yeah, I mean, but actually, I mean, then I got it over it quickly. Just like, you know what, this is really what I'm so interested in. It's fascinating, like all this stuff, and I'm just going to see if I can do something about it, you know. So.
You mentioned that you thought the book was a really intimate object in its relationship with its reader. Do you think that intimacy changes when you create books on such a large scale?
Yes. So because I was thinking about that and thinking about that intimacy, then I was, so sometimes when I think about it, or if I think a book is about intimacy, I might challenge myself to say, well, okay, let's see what happens if it's really big, and you know. But you know, the hanging book actually does, it folds into a box this big. It's not, you know, and you could, it's exhibited in that way, you know, this kind of, you know, installation kind of thing. And oh, because you can't, that's what I was going to say before. So it has a lot of writing, and the writing is really important, but at 14 feet you can't read it. So when I exhibit it, I reproduce the text on the wall around it, so you're reading at eye level and looking, and you know, kind of, it's a little bit of a challenge as a kind of reader. But yeah, so that just in terms of scale. But you know, I don't know. Did you see there was an article a couple of months ago about the British Library? They had conserved the largest book ever produced. Did you see that? It was like, there was a picture of like two people holding the book, or holding the book up, and it was like, it was huge, and it was a book produced, made in like the 17th century or something like that. And so, and then the, you know, the traditional Japanese scrolls are very big. They're, you know, I don't know, they're like this one, they're 20 to 30 feet across. But maybe I guess it's more the experience, so that, okay, so you're looking at a painting, okay, you know, whatever, 10 seconds you look at the painting, but a book, like a scroll, you're looking, you know, you are looking in sequentially, basically, right? So there is a kind of more one-on-one, or maybe an intimacy, even with a big book. It's a thought. Yes? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Huh. Um, I don't think so. I think it was so compelling and so intense. I think that's kind of done. I mean, I'm continually, and I've always been interested in sort of the text, language, voice, sound. I mean, and those ideas show up in all the work. It does. Yeah, actually. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's in some of the work there's text in it, and then sometimes I have text near it. So, like in that small edition book of 10, I actually have the poems. You could read as a separate kind of enterprise. And in that first book that I showed you, I was unable to marry the text and image, and so I actually just put the text here and the images here. So, but I'm not sure. I guess I'm interested in kind of, as I kind of go along, I'm interested in abstraction and those, maybe an abstract iteration of some of these ideas. Where it might be less narrative driven or less, kind of story driven. So. No. Mm-mm. Yeah, no. I've done, sometimes people hire me to, they commission me to do something for a record cover or a play or something like that. But it has to be because, I mean, that usually happens because what I'm doing already sort of fits with what they're making or whatever. So a long time ago, I used to be a landscape painter, a long, long time ago. And that actually informs my work a lot too, but kind of under here. So. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for the workshop yesterday, and I noticed that in one of your books you had referred to the twin wolves. And I wanted to let you know that my daughter, who was there yesterday, actually did the story of Romulus and Remus.
Huh.
And the book was just
Oh, fantastic.
coincidence when I found it there. My question is, and I'm sorry if you addressed this already, have you thought about other writing systems besides English when you think about marking a voice, whether it's, Russian, Japanese, Hebrew, or musical notation, or other ways of expressing sound besides English writing?
Intellectually I have. I mean, I think about those things for sure, and I'm sort of fascinated by exactly those. How are sound, the representation of sound in a different alphabet, and I think that's what you're talking about. But I haven't done anything with it, so it has to come, really, very directly from sort of inside. If I mean, there are artists who do that. You just sort of take ideas and like, oh, I think I'll do that. But that doesn't work for me. But I like to think about those things and talk about them. So, and maybe curate a show about that. That would be really interesting. So, I think we're at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much for coming, and go see the show and come to the talk tomorrow, 5 to 7. So thank you.